The glass centerpiece wobbled. My 2-year-old daughter reached toward the shiny ribbons decorating it, smiling the way toddlers smile when the world still feels completely safe. Before I could cross the room, smack! The sound cut through the birthday chatter, like someone had slammed a door. Lily's tiny head jerked sideways. She stared for half a second, confused, before her face crumpled and she burst into terrified sobs. My older brother, Derek, lowered his hand as if he'd done something completely reasonable. "Little monster," he muttered. "Maybe now she'll learn." Every conversation stopped. I rushed across the living room and scooped Lily into my arms. "What did you just do?" I demanded. Derek didn't even look ashamed. She was grabbing things. Someone had to discipline her. "You hit my daughter." "So," he snapped, "she's out of control." Before I could answer, my mother stepped between us. "Claire, stop yelling." I looked at her in disbelief. "He slapped a 2-year-old." "It wasn't a slap," she insisted. "It was just a tap." My father folded his arms. "Kids need boundaries. You're too soft with her." Lily buried her face against my shoulder, crying so hard her whole body shook. Not one person reached for her. Not one person asked if she was hurt. Every adult in that room was focused on protecting the man who had just hit a toddler. That was the moment everything changed. I held Lily closer until her crying softened into frightened hiccups. The room felt strangely quiet now, despite nearly 20 relatives standing around us. A few avoided eye contact. Others pretended to rearrange paper plates or refill drinks, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Only Derek looked comfortable. He shrugged, grabbed another soda from the cooler, and leaned casually against the kitchen counter. "I said what I said," he announced. "She's a little monster. Someone has to teach her manners." I stared at him, waiting for the apology that never came. Instead, my mother sighed dramatically. "Claire, honestly, you're making this bigger than it is." "Bigger?" I looked down at Lily's red cheek. "She's 2. My father shook his head. "If you hadn't let her run around, none of this would have happened." There it was. Not concern. Not outrage. Blame. Directed at me. The little girl clinging to my neck wasn't the victim in their eyes. Neither was I. The victim, somehow, was Derek, for having to deal with a toddler. I bent down, picked up Lily's blanket from beside the couch, then grabbed her diaper bag near the front door. Nobody tried to help. Nobody stopped Derek. As I reached for my keys, my mother called after me. "So you're really leaving over this?" I turned back only once. "I understand." Nothing more. No screaming. No threats. No dramatic speech. I carried Lily outside, buckled her into her car seat, and kissed the top of her head while she continued to cry softly. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Family messages flooded in. "You're overreacting. You ruined your niece's birthday. Come back and act like an adult." Derek was only trying to help. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I opened a different app. One by one, I began saving every message, every voicemail, every text, every excuse. Because while everyone inside that house thought I'd finally given up on my family, I had just started making sure none of them could ever rewrite what happened. Why was I saving every single message? Lily had stopped crying by the time we reached the urgent care clinic, but she hadn't said a single word. That scared me more than the tears. Normally, she'd point at every bird, every balloon, every dog she saw through the car window. Now she sat quietly in her car seat, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly its ears were bent flat. I carried her inside. The receptionist smiled politely until she noticed the faint red mark on Lily's cheek. "What happened?" I hesitated. The answer caught in my throat. My brother hit her." Her expression changed immediately. She handed me the paperwork without another question and quietly alerted the nurse. The physician examined Lily with extraordinary patience. She checked her face, looked into her eyes, and watched how she reacted to light and movement. Fortunately, there were no signs of a serious injury. "The redness should fade," she said gently, "but I'm documenting everything." She looked directly at me. "Can you tell me exactly what happened?" For a moment, old instincts took over. Maybe I should soften it. Maybe I shouldn't make Derek sound so bad. Maybe. "No." "He slapped her," I said. She reached toward a centerpiece and he slapped her. The physician nodded without interrupting. When she finished writing, she folded her hands. "I'm very sorry this happened. You should know you have every right to report this." Every right. The words echoed inside my head. Because my family had spent my entire life convincing me I never had that right. While Lily colored quietly with crayons the nurse had brought her, memories I hadn't thought about in years began surfacing. Derek shoving our younger cousin into a swimming pool because he thought it was funny. He didn't mean it. Derek screaming at our aunt during Thanksgiving. He's just stressed. Derek punching a hole through our parents' garage wall after losing money. Everyone gets angry. Every incident ended exactly the same way. Someone else apologized. Never Derek. Sometimes it was me. Sometimes another relative. Sometimes our parents apologized on his behalf, while insisting everyone forgive him because that's just Derek. Somewhere along the way, we'd all accepted that keeping Derek calm mattered more than everyone else's safety, including a child's. My phone rang. "Mom." I declined the call. It rang again. Then Dad. Then Mom again. Finally, I answered. "What?" My mother's voice was already irritated. "When are you coming back?" "I'm not." "For heaven's sake, Claire, it was a little tap." He hit Lily. "Oh, stop using that word." "What word?" "Hit. You're making Derek sound abusive." I looked through the exam room window at my daughter, who was quietly placing stickers on a coloring page. She kept rubbing the same cheek he'd struck. I ended the call without another word. Before I could put my phone away, another message appeared. This one from Derek. "She'll never learn if you baby her. You should thank me instead of acting like a victim." I stared at the screen. Not once did he ask whether Lily was okay. Not once did he apologize. He actually believed he'd done nothing wrong. Instead of responding, I opened a new folder on my phone. I labeled it with today's date. Inside it, I saved screenshots of every text, every missed call, every voicemail notification. When the clinic handed me Lily's visit summary, I scanned it into the same folder. Then I photographed the redness on her cheek from multiple angles under good lighting. For the first time that day, I wasn't reacting. I was preserving. That evening, after Lily finally fell asleep curled against her stuffed rabbit, another notification appeared. A voicemail from Derek. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Claire, you're blowing this way out of proportion. You'd better drop this before you destroy the whole family." I listened to it twice. Then I saved that too. By the third day, I realized my family had already decided on the official version of the story. Not the truth. The version that protected Derek. My Aunt Carol called first. "Claire, sweetheart, this has gone far enough. It happened 3 days ago. I mean the drama. Everyone's upset." I stared at my kitchen table, where Lily was quietly stacking wooden blocks. "Everyone, you embarrassed your brother." I almost laughed. "He hit my daughter." Carol lowered her voice. "People lose their tempers. With toddlers." There was a long pause. Finally, she sighed. "Your parents think you should apologize so everyone can move on." I ended the call without answering. For the first time in my life, keeping the peace no longer mattered more than protecting my child. The next evening, my parents asked everyone to come to their house. "We're settling this as a family," my father texted. I almost declined. Then I realized something. If everyone was going to hear Derek's version, they deserved to hear mine. I arrived carrying only a slim folder and my phone. No lawyer. No dramatic entrance. Just evidence. The atmosphere felt strangely normal. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. Dessert sat untouched on the dining room table. Relatives spoke in hushed voices until Derek walked into the room as though he were attending an ordinary Sunday dinner. He looked at me and rolled his eyes. "I hope you're ready to admit you've blown this out of proportion." I didn't answer. Dad stood first. "We're here because this family needs healing." Mom nodded. No more accusations, no more gossip. Then Derek folded his arms. "I'll say it again." He looked around the room before looking directly at me. "She wasn't hurt." He shrugged. "Claire lets Lily do whatever she wants. I corrected her, that's all." Several relatives nodded uncertainly. No one challenged him. He continued. "If she'd actually parented her child, none of this would have happened." Mom immediately added, "Exactly." I opened my folder, but didn't remove a single page. Instead, I picked up my phone. "I only have one question." Everyone looked at me. If this really happened the way Derek says it did. I tapped the screen. Then why does this recording sound so different? The room filled with Lily's frightened crying. No one spoke. Then Derek's own voice came through the speaker. I slapped her because she wouldn't listen. A sharp intake of breath came from across the room. The recording continued. My voice. "You hit a 2-year-old. Then my mother's unmistakable reply. It wasn't that hard. My father followed. "Claire, stop making such a scene." The recording ended. The silence afterward felt heavier than any argument. Nobody looked at Derek anymore. They looked at each other. My cousin Melissa was the first to speak. I knew this sounded familiar. Every head turned toward her. She swallowed. "When my son was 4, she looked directly at Derek. "Well, you shoved him into the patio table because he spilled your drink." Mom immediately interrupted. "That was years ago." Melissa ignored her. "You told me not to tell anyone because Derek was having a hard time." Across the room, Uncle Ben slowly nodded. "I remember that." "So do I," another cousin added quietly. One memory became another. Small stories. Ignored stories. Excused stories. Not one of them had seemed important enough on its own. Together, they painted the same picture. Derek had been losing control around children for years. And every single time, someone had cleaned up the mess instead of forcing him to face it. Derek suddenly stood so fast his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. "This is ridiculous." He pointed at me. "You planned this." "No," I answered evenly. "I documented it." He grabbed his keys. "I'm not sitting here while everyone gangs up on me." He stormed toward the front door. It slammed hard enough to rattle the family photographs hanging in the hallway. Mom rounded on me immediately. "Are you happy now? You humiliated your own brother." I met her eyes for the first time all evening. Then I quietly closed my folder. The recording wasn't the first thing I submitted. Every face in the room changed. It was only one piece of the evidence. My mother's face drained of color. "What do you mean, submitted?" I stood and slid my folder back into my bag. "I mean exactly what I said." Dad took a step toward me. "You reported your own brother." I reported the assault on my daughter. Those words landed with a force that silence couldn't soften. No one tried to stop me as I walked out. This time, they weren't calling me dramatic. They were finally beginning to understand that this wasn't another family argument they could smooth over before the next holiday. It had moved beyond them. The following week, everything became official. An investigator contacted me and scheduled an interview. I brought everything: the urgent care records, the photographs taken that afternoon, screenshots of every message, the voicemail Derek had left, the audio recording from the birthday party. The investigator organized each item carefully. Did anyone witness the incident? Nearly 20 people. Willing to speak? I don't know. She nodded. We'll find out. For the first time since the party, I felt like someone wasn't asking me to keep the peace. They were asking for facts. The calls to my relatives began. Some refused at first. Others answered reluctantly. Then, little by little, people started telling the truth. Melissa described the incident with her son years earlier. Uncle Ben confirmed he'd seen Derek explode over minor inconveniences more than once. Another cousin admitted she'd stopped bringing her children to family gatherings whenever Derek was expected to be there. I always made excuses, she confessed during one interview. I told everyone my kids had soccer practice. She paused. The truth is, I didn't trust him. That sentence stayed with me. Not because it surprised me, because she'd never said it out loud until now. Then another development changed everything. One evening, Melissa called me. You need to hear this. What happened? Your parents called me. My stomach tightened. What did they say? They asked me to remember the party differently. I didn't speak. Melissa continued. They kept saying Derek never really hit Lily. Your mom said emotions make people exaggerate. Did they ask you to change your statement? Yes. She sounded disappointed more than angry. They said if I loved this family, I'd help end the investigation. The next morning, she forwarded me screenshots of the conversation. Later that day, another cousin did the same. The pattern was unmistakable. My parents weren't trying to learn the truth. They were trying to protect Derek from it. Those messages were added to the growing file. Meanwhile, the story spread beyond the family. Not because I posted about it. Because people talked. Friends who had defended Derek began calling less often. A neighbor who'd known him for years quietly admitted she'd never let him babysit. Even coworkers who'd heard only fragments started asking uncomfortable questions. For the first time in his life, Derek couldn't control the narrative. He couldn't charm everyone into believing he'd simply been misunderstood. He was having to answer for what he'd done. I made one decision that required no discussion. I blocked Derek's number. Then I blocked my parents' numbers. I updated Lily's daycare with written instructions that none of them were authorized to pick her up. The director nodded after reading the paperwork. We'll make sure everyone on staff knows. Walking back to my car, I realized something. I wasn't acting out of anger anymore. I was building boundaries. Real ones. A week later, my father left a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. His voice sounded exhausted. Claire, please. I listened without interrupting. Withdraw everything. Families survive worse than this. I let the message finish. Then I deleted the number without replying. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for saying no. 3 days later, an email notification appeared on my phone. The official review had been completed. The next phase would move forward, and everyone involved would soon be formally notified. There would be no more private negotiations. No more family meetings. No more rewriting what happened. The consequences had arrived. The official findings arrived 2 weeks later. I sat at my kitchen table after Lily had fallen asleep, reading every page carefully. The investigation concluded that Derek had intentionally struck a 2-year-old child during the family gathering. The medical documentation, witness statements, audio recording, and messages all supported the same sequence of events. There wasn't a different version anymore. There wasn't my side and his side. There were simply the facts. Because a child had been assaulted, the appropriate legal process moved forward. Derek was required to face the consequences of his actions, and legal protections were put in place to ensure he would have no unsupervised contact with Lily. When I finished reading, I quietly closed the folder. For the first time since that birthday party, I slept through the night. A few days later, Derek asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I agreed, but only in the office of a professional mediator. He looked different. Tired. Smaller somehow. He kept his eyes on the table. I made a mistake. I waited. I shouldn't have hit her. Another pause. I'm sorry. Months earlier, hearing those words might have meant everything. Now they sounded incomplete. Not because they were too late. Because they had arrived only after every excuse had failed. I looked at him calmly. Are you sorry you hurt Lily? He hesitated. Then he answered. I'm sorry this went this far. That told me everything I needed to know. I stood. I hope one day you understand the difference. Then I left. It was the last conversation we ever had. The hardest part wasn't losing Derek. It was watching my parents finally realize what their choices had cost them. Relatives who had once stayed silent began speaking openly. Melissa confronted my mother. You spent years protecting Derek. My mother wiped away tears. I was trying to keep the family together. Melissa shook her head. No. You were asking everyone else to sacrifice their safety, so he never had to face consequences. There was nothing anyone could say to argue with that anymore. Uncle Ben stopped attending gatherings where Derek was invited. Other cousins admitted they had avoided bringing their children around him for years. Several apologized to me. Not because they had hit Lily, because they had ignored warning signs for far too long. One cousin quietly said, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. So do I answered. Life became quieter after that. Painfully quiet at first. Birthdays were smaller. Holiday dinners looked different. There were empty seats where my parents and brother used to be. But there was something else now. Peace. No one yelled. No one walked on eggshells. No one wondered whether Derek would lose his temper. Lily laughed freely again. The redness on her cheek had disappeared within days. The fear took longer. Whenever an unfamiliar man raised his voice in a grocery store or restaurant, she'd instinctively reach for my hand. Each time, I'd kneel beside her. You're safe. Eventually, she believed me. My parents tried, reaching out several more times through letters. They never denied what Derek had done anymore. Instead, they asked me to forgive him. To forgive them. To let everyone move on. I read every letter once. Then I put them away. Forgiveness and reconciliation weren't the same thing. I could let go of my anger without placing my daughter back into an unsafe environment. That boundary never changed. Months later, Lily celebrated her 3rd birthday. This time, the guest list was short. Melissa came with her children. Uncle Ben stopped by carrying balloons almost taller than he was. A few close friends from work filled the backyard with laughter. Nobody criticized Lily for being energetic. When she accidentally knocked over a cup of juice, 3 adults reached for paper towels. Nobody shouted. Nobody called her names. Nobody lifted a hand. I watched her run through the yard wearing a paper birthday crown, laughing so hard she could barely catch her breath. For the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't mourning the family I'd lost anymore. I was grateful for the one I had built. not through obligation. Through trust. Through people who believed protecting a child mattered more than protecting appearances. I once thought walking out of that birthday party meant my family was falling apart. Looking back, I understand something very different. The family I lost was built on silence. The family I kept was built on safety. And if I had to choose between the two again, I would pick up my little girl, walk out that same front door, and never look back. The day I walked out carrying my little girl, I didn't lose my family. I discovered who never truly deserved to be called one.